All right. Yes, Mel, over here. Wait for the mic so we can all hear you.
Hi, Melissa from Vanguard, and I want to take something that Paula said at the very beginning and Rusty said at the end and ask you to help us work through this. So, Paula, you talked about the importance of having your team removed from the rest of the teams because you're going to have, maybe a 20% success rate. Experiments, they should fail. That's the way we should do things. Help us manage expectations. What should we expect from our experimentation teams as far as success of experiments? And then how do you work in what Rusty's saying, that you want those analytics and the experimentation teams close to the business? Because we're trying to push ours close to the business, and I'm worried that they're going to get close to the business and they're going to fail 80% of the time, and that's going to look like failure.
Oh, geez. Okay. So I'll take the first part. You can take the second. So I can only speak for Hilton because, again, it's kind of been much of my career. The way I tell the story, again, storytelling, bingo. The way I tell the story when I'm talking to pretty much anybody outside our immediate team is I start out by describing that in the past, I'll say 36 months, the way we ran experimentation prioritization, so who got to rank the backlog, who got to decide what experiments we're going to run, was made up of a governance team of our chief digital officer, the lead designer, the lead digital marketer, like the C-suite of digital, essentially. Supposedly the smartest people around, including design and UX and the people who should understand how to do things digitally. And they were the people who decided my prioritization. And our win rate over that period of time was 19%. And so I tell that story to say, guys, even when the smartest minds are in complete agreement about what needs to be tested, AKA what's going to win and what we should get out on the site faster, we're running around 19%. And oh, by the way, smart people like Kelly tell me that the industry average is around 20%. So we're good. We're right there with the industry. But think about how much we've learned, and what we learned from the failure is almost more important than what we learned from the winners, and what things don't ever achieve significance because they kind of don't matter what we do in that little box and what color that is, and et cetera, et cetera. So that's how I tell that story. I feel like that story resonates just as well when I'm talking to the marketing audience over on the business side, because they understand what I'm saying, is that leadership is super smart, but they make mistakes too, and this is a process. So that's how I kind of set expectations early on. And again, I talk a lot about the qualitative work that we do as well, and how customers struggle to, it's not easy to book a hotel room. It's not easy to book a flight. It's, this hospitality space is hard, and we've trained people to do it in a certain way, and it's not intuitive, et cetera, and everybody seems to understand that. So that's the expectation setting part. I don't know if that helps a little bit. Okay, I'll let you take a second.
All right. I think the failure is trying to do it at scale too quickly first. I'll say that. I think there's so much tremendous amount of change in what I'm about to say that I think going smaller is better. I think the answer, I've heard two books mentioned in the context of this conference so far that I would bring up here. I think Team of Teams, which was brought up earlier, which I think is a great book. And I think the Lean Startup, which is what we're talking about here, right? Which is defining cycles of learning as success, right? Because then it doesn't matter if you fail or learn.
Right.
It is a cycle of learning. It is success in and of itself. The Team of Teams component comes into your organizational design, right? Imagine in an ideal world, we have a developer sitting next to an analytics person, sitting next to a marketer, sitting next to a designer, all collaborating on a well-defined business outcome, like grow the lifetime value of this customer base, right? Not a product, not a service, not whatever. Listen to this customer base and grow the lifetime value of this customer base. Then lots of experimentation and failures are going to lead to success against that outcome ultimately, right? And they're collaborating faster and cycling faster around that. The learnings will continue to grow at a faster rate, and the outcome will happen. I think that's what we need to move to. That's not how many legacy enterprise organizations were built, so there's a huge cultural turn there, which is why I say small, not scale, is the answer to that question. But we're going to spend a lot of money in tech stacks, and the pressure is going to be to go to scale with those technologies, but we've got to resist that. And I think we've got to go small and build the teams of the future, and scale the teams of the future up is probably, displace the way we're doing things today with a new way of doing business, I think is the answer, so.
Easy,
Easy.
in other words. I know, right? Anyone else have questions?
Got a question.
Hit us, Mel.
So, Rusty, you mentioned that you see the focus moving more towards the experiential and how customers feel about brands and not just about a specific, a specific experiment, a specific feature, a specific piece or part of that. So I'm curious how you think that should be measured. How do we measure that experiential piece? I feel like there's sort of a common agreement that NPS is not the way to do it. So how are we doing that?
I don't know that I've got a total great answer to that, but I think it's quant and qual together, right? I mean, we've been saying that over and over again, is that maybe in the spirit of analytics, we've gone a little too far to the quant side. At Vanguard, I literally sat next to the research, the market research and usability, and all the qualitative was half a cubicle away, and we never interacted on projects, which is, we're not going to build better products if that's how we're operating. We're not going to build better experiences ultimately if that's how we're operating. So again, I think these collaborative teams of teams are the way to get things done in a new way, right? Having market research embedded in there, having qualitative,
Standing in hotel lobbies.
standing in a hotel lobby, actually experiencing it, doing ride-alongs with your sales, whatever it is, go feel it and touch it and experience it and see it from your customer's perspective, however that is. And we have to develop that way, because ultimately, this is becoming a world of fast followers, right? I mean, you can't come up with a product that someone else can't come up with in a month or two, right? Even no matter how complex it is. I remember when I was with Vanguard, Schwab invented the robo-advice solution, right? So it was AI building advice and making recommendations to you. We had built a solution and exceeded them in assets under management in 6 months. We hadn't even started that project when they launched it, right? So it isn't a product market anymore, it's an experiential market. That's what we're competing on here, right? There's a reason why people go to Disney World when there's an amusement park in their backyard. The experience is so much better, right? We've got Atlantic City right here, but we still go to Vegas if you really want to. The hotels are huge, you can see it. It's about the experience. So brands are competing on experience today, and we've got to get better. In order to build great experiences, you've got to listen to your customer and put them at the center of this. Where we've put testing, we've built testing teams in organizations, and they dry up for ideas when there is no listening to the customer. There's nothing to test. They run out of product test
Button
this,
colors.
tagline test that. You've got to listen to your client. That's where your ideas are going to come from. So I think that's the core of it all, and I think a good listening would include quant and qual solutions in that. So.
There was a question over here.
All right, so I like the product team idea, but I'm kind of wrestling with something in my head, which is for someone who's doing testing, like what is the name of their department and their title, and should they sit within analytics or beside analytics?
They're called the innovation. No.
All right, if we want to kind of zoom in on the Walmart Labs example, why was the reorg better? Like, what was better about that?
I think that's a good question. I think putting testing and analytics was is good because, I mean, testing is, if anything, all about results, right? What are the results of testing, and how do you get results? The easiest way, or the most direct way, is quantitatively, which is analytics, right? Now, hearing all this about qualitative, I know we do qualitative pre-testing, right? But on the A/B test itself, it's usually almost always quantitative, unless something comes out weird, then they start thinking, oh, maybe, what's the customer really thinking here? But from that standpoint, the fact that the majority of tests are the way that you would evaluate them is through the data and through the qualitative data is, it makes sense to put it in analytics. But like I said before, right, that's the org that I know, so it makes sense to me, but I don't think it's the org everywhere, and it obviously works well in different ways. So it's not, I don't think that's the only answer.
What do you call the people who run testing at Hilton?
So the testing team is called optimization. And everybody else who does digital research, everything besides optimization, they're called experience design researchers, because our overall team is called experience design.
There you go. I've heard everything from CRO to experimentation managers, experimentation analysts. There's a lot of words, a lot of titles and descriptions. But Paula, you said your team sits in IT and your team sits in analytics. I've seen them sit in marketing. I've even seen them sit in UX and brand. And I think there's obviously pros and cons to all of those options.
And just to add, I mean, our analytics group is inside the product org. So
Right.
that's another layer.
And Paula, do you find with your testing program sitting in the technical world that you focus more on product testing than marketing testing?
Yeah, we're almost exclusively on product testing. And I think that's by design.
Yeah.
Not for lack of wanting to test our marketing, because I'd love to test our marketing. But it's the money.
Yeah.
It's the money. We test, 80% of our tests are in our booking funnel.
Sure.
It's where the money is.
Sure. Anybody else? If the next
So-
question could come from over here. No, is she?
I just needed to stand. This is kind of around the analytics space a little bit, but do you think, an open question to anybody, do you think, and I'm going to choose my words a little carefully here, but do you think the role of an analyst for discovering insights will go away? And if so, when?
Interesting.
Not a trick question.
I hate that word insight. No.
No. That's Tim.
Are you basically getting at, like, are analysts sort of going to get replaced by automated algorithms that are finding what's important in the data? Or what's sort of the thrust of what you're looking for there?
A lot of the conversations in digital analytics aside, I know there's the optimization program aspect, the implementation program of it. There's the communication to executives and packaging. But the actual discovery process, where I think a lot of people are spending their time, is really fundamental reporting and I would say very limited discovery, actually, and maybe kind of top-down questions. But I think there's an opportunity, there's a lot of white space in the analysis right now, and I think we're missing a lot of opportunities, a lot of problems there. And so yes, I do think AI, machine learning, will essentially replace a large role of the analysts today outside of the functions I described. Those are more organizational administrative functions. But actually the discovery process, as you go through the application here, discovering what types of tests you should be doing. Like, oh, here's an opportunity, let's go test this. So I really think, person, but I want to get your opinion. You know, I think on the horizon here, a lot more of this will be done in an automated fashion rather than a person sitting down spending 50% of their time doing that.
I'm not sure. I definitely think that anomaly detection, a lot of analysts are really nothing more than occasional anomaly detectors who look at reports and beep, beep, beep when something looks out of line. Having said that, real analytics is almost always a response to someone having a question about how something works, why something doesn't work, or what something can be done, and then assembling a bunch of data that's relevant to the question that may never have been used in that function before and doing something with it. So, and that's not, you may use a machine learning tool to do that, but it's never going to happen in an automated fashion, or at least it's not going to happen in an automated fashion with any AI that we are, experiencing right now. So no, I do agree. I think there's a tremendous amount of white space in analytics. I think there's a lot of analytics that's still to be done. I think organizations have made vast strides in how they use analytics and how analytic they are, but it's still tip of the iceberg territory compared to what I think could be done in an ideal organization. So I don't know if you guys have additional thoughts, but.
So I'm, again, not an analyst, but I think one way to answer that question is, like, will robots replace people in any industry, right, or any sort of function, right? And kind of like what Gary was saying, there's a lot of things that analysts are doing that can be automated, and it would make sense to automate those things. But then it gives them time to do the deeper level of maybe analytics, or even more creative level of analytics that you can't get from AI, right? Like, so, like, would analytics have invented the iPhone, right? Probably not, right? You could have had all this machine learning, but you wouldn't have come up with, this is what people really want, right? If they not necessarily need, but, now we all need it. So, same thing, right? Like, robotics, you can automate a bunch of stuff, and now people are free to do even more interesting things. So I don't think the role of an analyst would ever go away in that sense.
Let's